Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. We're a community of practice, of people practicing, even though we're doing a lot of other things together. The central pole of this community is doing practice, doing sadhana, various kinds of sadhana. And those of you that have been around for a while know that one of my points of integrity as a teacher is to try to not behave in such ways or do such things as would prevent other people from practicing. I don't have control over everyone's responses to everything, but as far as I'm able, I try to conduct myself and have Jaya Kula conduct itself in ways that do not discourage other people from doing practice. As members of this community, those of you that consider yourself to be members of this community and practitioners in this community, you are practicing for your own liberation. You are participating in the community for your own liberation, and also because it might be fun sometimes. You may not have articulated this to yourself, but in following the kind of life ways of Jaya Kula, you are also conducting yourself, at least semi-consciously, in a way that will not deter other people from doing practice. That's what we've always called the crucible. The crucible is the way that we hold Jaya Kula so that people can practice here. Many of us have been involved in other spiritual communities. So many of us have these experiences where maybe some people are nasty and there's no control on that. It just runs rampant, or they're not welcoming, or the teacher's conduct isn't so great. And then either over time, people get fed up and leave, or there's some big brouhaha upheaval, and then a lot of people leave. And when that happens, there's always some people who don't ever want to practice again, or it takes them a long time to get back to practice. So that's what we don't want. When we talk about holding the crucible, we mean creating a space where we can practice and where anyone else who shows up who wants to practice with us feels comfortable doing so. Then we have another word, which is mandala. Mandala means how we conceive of the community more structurally. A mandala in our tradition, it's a geometric form. This is a mandala or a yantra. This yantra is sort of a two-dimensional mandala. They can be two-dimensional or three-dimensional, but the word mandala in general often applies to a three-dimensional figure. But in any case, it is a map of the cosmos, but it's often compared in the tradition to a city. Just like in the city, you have people who want to live right downtown, close to where the action is. You have people who want to live a little far away from the center so they can get away from it when they want. You have people that want to live in the space between the city and the suburbs. And you have people who want to live in the suburbs, and you have people who want to live way out there. Maybe we see you once in a while. So our idea of the community has always been, at least my idea of community has always been, anyone that comes, they find their own location in the mandala. If they want to be close in, they're close in. If they don't want to be close in, they're not close in. But everyone who's positioned on that mandala somehow, like even people whose only way of participating is to listen to the podcast regularly, those people are all part of our community in some way or another, and they're helping to form the energy body of this community. So the mandala is the self-chosen hierarchy, in a sense, the natural hierarchy of people who want to practice a lot and be closer to the community and the teacher, and the people who want to practice more lightly or participate in other ways and maybe never even met me in person. The crucible is what we're doing as practitioners who are more close in on that mandala to hold Jaya Kula in such a way that it is a place where people who want to can practice with us without fear of harm coming to them. In 2023, our annual theme was belonging. We have many ways of talking about belonging in this community and hosting people so they feel like they belong. But in 2023, I wrote a message to the community about the theme for that year and about natural belonging or primordial belonging. This unquestioned, unconditional belonging that doesn't have to be proved to anybody, that already exists for everybody equally. And the question I was asking myself and that I posed to the community was, we already embody belonging in a sort of more conventional way through our hosting and through other means, but how can we embody natural belonging? How can we embody this primordial belonging? So there's never any question in anybody's mind about belonging. And I never had an answer to that question. I thought about it and meditated on it, and I really couldn't think of concrete ways that we could embody that. So that year went by, and I kind of felt like I had failed at answering my own question. What would it look like in a concrete way if we were embodying that primordial belonging? I think I have finally come up with an answer to that. And it started a while back when Matri and Alexa introduced me to this activist and scholar, Mia Mingus, who wrote about a term that she coined, access intimacy. And I'm going to read you a couple of quotes about access intimacy. These are from two different blog posts that Mia wrote at different times. Access intimacy is that elusive, hard to describe feeling when someone else gets your access needs. Mia Mingus is writing from the perspective of a disability activist, and this is part of her way of expressing that deeper belonging. Access intimacy is that elusive, hard to describe feeling when someone else gets your access needs. The kind of eerie comfort that your disabled self feels with someone on a purely access level. Sometimes it can happen with complete strangers, disabled or not, or sometimes it can be built over years. It could also be the way your body relaxes and opens up with someone when all your access needs are being met. So that was from the first article where she introduced this idea of access intimacy. And then a few years later, she wrote this. And the second thing I'm reading is really what I used to write something for Jaya Kula, which I call community access intimacy. Access intimacy is critical to disability justice because there will never be any work with disabled people that does not include accessibility work. Cultivating access intimacy is a way to directly challenge ableism and the relentless isolation that disabled people endure, especially disabled folks who are part of other oppressed communities. Access intimacy at once recognizes and understands the relational and human quality of access, while simultaneously deepening the relationships involved. It moves the work of access out of the realm of only logistics and into the realm of relationships and understanding disabled people as humans, not burdens. That's really beautiful. Disabled people's liberation cannot be boiled down to logistics, and that could go for all of us. Access intimacy is interdependence in action. So when we talk about interdependence, we're talking about a presumed equality. See, this is the problem with a lot of schemas for access or justice or equality or sharing power of some sort, which is that they presume that there's an inequality that first and foremost has to be rectified. What happens when you start with an equality that needs to be expressed? That was really my question. And of course, we have to do things to rectify those more normative forms of inequality. I'm not saying we're not doing that, but how can we also get underneath that to that deeper level where equality is presumed and unconditional, and how do we express that? And this idea of access intimacy, I think, really gets to it, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I hope that we can talk about it together. This was prompted by a series of events that happened recently where I felt like people were not embodying the open door quality to let other people in, that I want to be embodied by people in Jaya Kula. I started thinking about that series of events, and I'll talk about that later on. I'm going to go to the page that I printed out, and I'm just going to read through the different points that I made. And this is based on that second paragraph of the Megasis that I wrote. It's basically a cover of that with some word change and some other things added in. Community access intimacy is critical to welcoming and hosting, because there will never be any embodied expression of our primordial belonging that does not include accessibility, making it possible for people to access the teachings. Cultivating community access intimacy is a way to open the doors wide and challenge the relentless isolation that people endure, especially folks who are part of oppressed communities. Community access intimacy anticipates the access needs, and this is the key, anticipates, and I'm going to talk about what that involves. Not just of disabled people, but of people from various cultures and people who are very new to this genre of teachings. Community access intimacy is for all of us and is ongoing. It holds the mandala in a way that can be naturally self-organized, but never hierarchical in terms of degrees of belonging. So we can have organization, and we can have people who are closer in or further out, or more involved or less involved, but that should never imply any difference in the degree of belonging on this primordial level, right? Community access intimacy recognizes our interdependence and embodies the profoundly relational, not just logistical quality of access. It strengthens our relationships, encourages relaxation, and surfaces a deeper belonging. Community access intimacy is at the core of hosting and moves us closer to embodying wisdom virtue. It is sadhana for us as well as supportive of others. Community access intimacy is one of the main ways that we hold the crucible and do our part in making it possible for people to continue practicing with us. And I want to talk about some very concrete ways that Anandamayi practiced community access intimacy. These are some of the things that always impress me a lot about her behavior, and also are things that I aspire to, and certainly do not fully embody myself by any means. So first of all, Ima, in her extraordinary condition, was able to adapt to the condition of other people to an extraordinary degree. She was not holding on to a set of statements about who she was. She never said, I can't do that because I am something or other. There was never this idea that she had to be a specific thing and then she couldn't adapt to somebody else. So for instance, when I say, I just have this natural fierceness, I can't always be motherly. That is true, but that's a limitation. Ma could be motherly when motherly was called for. And she could be very, very fierce, much fiercer than me, when that was called for. And she was never telling someone, I can't be motherly because I'm a fierce person. So when we have these ideas about ourselves, we lose adaptability. We lose the ability to create the conditions for someone else to be able to feel that deeper belonging. So I'm just saying that because we all have those limitations, including me. None of us are going to be able to perfectly adapt to everything. But adapting to other people's conditions is one of the practical life ways of access intimacy. Often when she was with other people, she was playing a role. She played the role of a traditional Indian wife, and then she played the role of a traditional house guest. There's one story about she went to somebody's house and they wanted her to stay a lot longer than she had in mind. And she acquiesced to them because they had invited all their friends over. They wanted to show her off. Now, I could imagine that I might think something like, or even say something like, I'm not here to be shown off. Again, that's like a sticking point for me. Ma felt like it was much more important for people to spend 10 minutes with her. She felt it was a blessing for them to spend 10 minutes with her. She traveled all over India, so hundreds of thousands of people could spend 10 minutes with her. And however they behaved, or whether they ever did sadhana or not ever again, was of no consequence. So she had this unbelievable flexibility. And that has always been kind of a distant goal for me, for sure. But I'm just saying that we also want to increase our capacity to adapt to what it is that other people need to have those conditions that they can stay and do practice. And that means also adjusting to the capacities of others. So a long while back, there was somebody in the community who was neurodivergent, and a lot of their way of relating to people was to tell you about all the deep dives they've been going into. I happen to be someone who really likes deep dives, so I never minded this at all. I just felt I was learning about stuff. But there was a couple of other people who were annoyed by it and felt like this person was showing off their knowledge. So we have to be able to reflect on when we're just setting a line between us and somebody else that doesn't need to be there. Can we just enjoy the way other people are? Can we examine what it is that is preventing us from just enjoying someone sharing something they're interested in? Something as simple as that, right? So Ma established very strict Brahminical rules at the ashrams. First of all, she didn't even want ashrams. She told everybody not to build ashrams, and they insisted. And so when they insisted, she went along with it. It's like, okay, you're not going to take the short path. I'll go the long path with you. And then she established these very strict Brahminical rules in the ashrams where no Westerners could stay there and only Brahmins could eat there. And a lot of the Westerners were upset by this. She did it so that the Brahmins could enjoy the ashrams that they basically insisted on. And then she went out of her way to host Westerners in different ways, to have separate eating facilities for them. She was constantly talking about how much she enjoyed having them, which really annoyed some of the Indian people. How much fun Westerners were to play with was one of the things that she used to talk about. There were still some pissed off Westerners because people with fixed ideas about equality on this very surface level, we have to be let into this thing. We have to eat with the Brahmins. This is unfair. Not able to see what Ma was doing, not able to allow there to be that kind of solution that's not following conventional Western ideas of justice or equality, and not being able to give that in a sense. Ma was giving that to the Brahmins, and she didn't eat like they did. She would drink out of puddles, and she ate fish occasionally. She was not a strict vegetarian, but when she was around them, she would do as they did. And this is actually something that's from all of our traditions, which is this kind of invisibility, except when it's not needed, that we're not asserting ourselves so insistently in order to actually be in a more alive, present relationship and be able to give things to people. What I'm talking about requires a few things. It requires thinking ahead, imagining ahead, feeling ahead. It requires us to have a much wider view of things. I was talking to somebody about the hosting that I do at my house now, because there's teachings at my house and I'm doing various preparatory things. And it's the same that I do for a lot of things related to Jaya Kula. And definitely when Jaya Kula was very young, I was the only person doing setup. Now I have one helper at my house each time. But in any case, there's still a lot of setup for me to do. And I've described this before, that when I'm setting up for students to come, I am imagining students coming. This is just happening naturally. And I'm imagining all the things you will need. And I'm imagining your happiness on receiving those things. And I'm feeling happy when I imagine you being happy receiving those things and having things well prepared for you and taken care of in advance. This is a pleasure. This is not a burden. This is the kind of wide thinking, feeling, imagining that I'm talking about, that community access intimacy is going to require us to do. We don't do this, most of us, naturally. We don't think of the widest sphere of influence. We don't think of all the people involved when we're, for instance, setting up a community event. So this is one of the things that happened this week. Someone set up a community event, invited people to a community event, but without checking the teaching schedule. Focus was too narrow. And then I said something, and then, well, I'll move the time back. I hope you can come. Well, you hope I can come? You actually don't care all that much, is what I got out of that. We need to widen our view and be actually welcoming. I've already looked at everything. I've already taken your needs into account. I've already made room for you. This is what access intimacy looks like. So thinking ahead, feeling ahead, looking ahead. Maybe you have to learn some things about what other people need. Maybe it's something you don't already know. You have to do some research. That might be happening in some case also. But when someone is really taken care of in advance, you have been thought of in advance. This is, I think, the essence, or the starting point, in any case, the center of this whole idea of community access intimacy. And then adapting to welcoming others by giving up assertion of our preferences and our brand. Welcoming others, giving up our maniacal need to assert ourselves, what we like, what we don't like, what we're willing to adapt to and bend on, and what we're not. Now, I don't think we can do that or need to do that 100% of the time, and I'll talk about that. But we can do it a lot more. So then something else happened this week on the live stream, and this has actually happened before on the live stream. It's not singling anybody out. On the Wednesday and Saturday morning live stream when we're doing Gayatri. First of all, we're doing that for everyone. This is an offering and a prayer, and we want more people to participate, and it's also a place where people who don't really do anything else with the community will come to do that. They will come to chant the Gayatri with us. They don't know anything about Jaya Kula. They just saw something on the internet. This is a very multi-layered thing. It's very simple, but when you really dig into it, I have a platform that I use where I can have some people that are on the live stream with me who are practicing students. The reason why I love this is because it helps me give the transmission. It helps me give the transmission when I can see your faces and when you're practicing with me. So that was my initial impulse. But there's also a way that it helps the other people who are on YouTube watching the live stream to feel like they're part of a group. They're not just looking at me. They have other people to practice with. And this past week, somebody was on the live stream being very distracted in various ways, self-grooming on the live stream. I have no objection to this in some abstract way, but it's really distracting, and it's not holding the crucible of that practice, right? It's not really accompanying me or the people who are watching the live stream. But of course, we don't think about that. We're in our homes. We're just doing the live stream. We're maybe not thinking about who else is watching, right? Or how is this accompanying Shambhavi? How is this supporting Shambhavi? Or how is this supporting the energy of our practice? This has happened before. This is not like a new thing, but it's an area where we can really start thinking bigger. And then somebody else was on the live stream dressed very scantily, but not indecently. But at some point, they put their knees up, which were almost entirely bare, and their shoulders were bare, and their arms were bare. And they put their knees up in such a way that you could not really tell whether they were wearing clothes or not. They were covering over their clothing, which was scanty, with these nude parts of their body. And I kept squinting at it, thinking, okay, if I were watching this, would I know that this person was actually wearing clothes? So I took both of those people off the live stream in the middle of the live stream because I thought it was distracting. And then I was also thinking, when I was practicing in India, the various times I've been there, sometimes I've been in the homes of very conservative Indians. They were hosting some retreat or something. And I would be wearing a short sleeve shirt that was like here. And then we go, oh, put on a long sleeve shirt. They were very picky about covering up your body. And I would do that. Like, I didn't go off on a huff thinking, oh, these sexist misogynists. I mean, maybe they were sexist misogynists, but that's the kind of thing that we don't always need to assert. We're there to do the practice. So in any case, I do want to say about something like that, because I thought about this long and hard, that there are times and circumstances, and I wrote this down, when wisdom dictates that we do not adapt to what other people need. And I think learning to discern when it's important to adapt and when it's important not to adapt is a skill that you would have to hone for yourselves. If we have 100 things that we're asserting about ourselves, maybe only 2 of those really need to be asserted. But we can find out what those are. So just a couple more things and then I'm going to stop. These are more concrete elements of community access intimacy. Adapting to welcoming others when it inconveniences you. This is a big one, and I especially was thinking of this around masking. There are few people in the community who don't invite people over their homes anymore if masks have to be worn or testing has to happen. That's sad to me. I felt sad about that. And it isn't holding the crucible, right? It's an inconvenience. It is an inconvenience even for those of us that are masking. But it's an inconvenience that I think people can adapt to if they're really wanting to cultivate access intimacy. It's important. So letting yourself be inconvenienced. And of course, many of you have heard me say that this was one of Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher's definitions of friendship, the willingness to be inconvenienced. I've always thought that was very beautiful. Right? Recognizing that learning to adapt to the circumstances of others in order to surface this belonging, this deeper belonging, is for our benefit also, not just for somebody else's benefit. What is it doing for us? It's helping us to let go of a lot of dogmatism about who we are and what we're capable of and what we're not capable of and what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. So my questions that I ended up with are, how are we already embodying community access intimacy? How are we falling short? And how can we do better?
I was thinking today I had a client who wanted me to use lotion instead of oil, and I was so annoyed for most of the session. It throws off my whole flow.
Yeah, it's in those fine-grained details, right? This is something I've called resistless adaptation. Like resistlessly changing to host somebody, right? Not just getting into it and getting over it and then moving on, but being able to just go with absolutely no emotional response to the fact that you need to use lotion instead of oil. The goal is to be able to change on a dime.
Hi, I am really fascinated by the layer of what you're talking about with this intimacy being relational, not just logistical. And I was hoping you could speak a little bit deeper into that relational quality and how this opens up a new ability to relate. I've been thinking all day about the way that shows up in my work, where I deal with literal accessibility, ADA access in buildings and spaces. And a lot of design is around the logistics of access.
When we're thinking this way, we're being in touch with I hate to use the word humanness because there's so much crap said in the name of humanness, but we're reaching into the beingness, the humanness of another person and acknowledging our connection, that their happiness is our happiness, because taking care of them increases our happiness and our freedom also. Logistics could be thought of as burdensome or technical, but for instance, if you just took one aspect of what you're required to do by law, and then you extended that so that you incorporated something that went beyond what the law requires, how would you feel? If I were in your position, building buildings, an architect and a builder, if I were in your position and I had sort of this set of requirements, and I looked over the list and I found like one thing, one place in each requirement where I could go beyond what the requirement was, I would feel so happy. It would open my heart. It would make me feel a sense of contentment in my heart and joy, even, I would say. Do you think you might feel the same?
I totally know what you're talking about, especially when my understanding of the building is very deep and nuanced in ways that people can't even understand the building themselves.
Yes, imagine a person coming into that space for the first time and all the hundreds of things that you've done to make that space cleaner and safer and more accessible and more beautiful. Even the things they don't notice or don't know anything about. That's really the best thing we can do against all the cruelty that's happening in the world, to take care of each other in this way.
Sometimes taking care of each other means asking first. I often think the gold standard of access intimacy is, as you're saying, think ahead and anticipate, which means, in my mind, don't ask, but actually I want people to ask. I like it when people ask.
There's a little weird area we get into sometimes where we want to be the person who helps other people. And then we start doing stuff for other people that they don't actually want done, or they don't want it done in that way. There's a lot of times when we have to ask, I'd like to do this. Is this okay? Or how would you like this done? Or would this help you or not? Yeah, absolutely. The pre-thought is that we even thought of it.
Yeah.
Right. But if we get into this thing where we're the helper and we're going to be admired and loved for this, then it gets really cringy.
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand that we're doing this as a devotional practice. This is not something we're doing for the greater glory of us.
We talk a lot about opening our senses in this practice. I've been feeling cut off from that in a way from my sleep issues. Reading about this was just making me think about that in maybe a more expansive way, that I still can sense what's going on with other people and relationships, and that maybe I was stuck in a more superficial idea of opening the senses as only being more alert to little things that are happening. There's still so much I can do and cultivate to work towards access intimacy as a goal. I'm curious if that sounds true to you, or if there's things I'm not seeing about that.
We're not trying to pin ourselves to obvious sensory inputs in the present. There's a much more oceanic kind of sensing that's going on, of much more subtle things, including other people's feelings. Absolutely. It's a full volume thing. It's happening in the volume of life, and it's happening on levels of body and energy and heart.
I can feel myself relishing this idea and seeing how there's lots of ways where it would support me if I was to receive that access intimacy in relationships. And then I was just noticing I can see this slippery way that diminishing my own needs without realizing it, because I'm trying to support others' access needs, trying to be really accommodating and supportive to those I'm in relationship with, and how I actually need to maybe do that a little bit less. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I agree. There's a difference between something that's sort of bordering on codependence and what we're talking about here. But I think that's a really good place for you to think on and meditate on where that difference lies and how you can discern that in real time, for sure.
I wanted to put my 2 cents in the bucket, which the idea about not having our preferences and brand be the separator speaks to me, and I would like to work on that.
We spend a lot of time at this point in history and our culture defining ourselves in various ways with our various identities and our politics and who we are and how we are. Wow, there's just so much stamping going on. And then there's just ways in which human beings have always tried to self-define and stick to some version of themselves and insist on it. But I think it's much worse now. We all have a lot of work to do in that area, including me.
Just being curious and listening to another person talk about things that one may not be interested in, that I may not be interested in, that is a nice welcome.
Maybe you're not interested in what they're talking about, but you're interested in having them feel welcomed, right?
I was thinking about when I get kind of like vajted out and then I miss details that often do it. So it feels like motivation to be more settled so that I can catch them. So sometimes I don't have that much motivation to be more settled, but this feels like good motivation.
See if you can go along that path of including to the point where you feel enjoyment at how those people are going to feel when you make those offerings. Because for me, that's the end point. And I'm not doing this like deliberately or anything. This is sort of just all happening in a moment. It's like tasting food. I'm tasting people's feeling of joy or relaxation or comfort or being cared for. So see if you can get to that point, and then you've gone as far as you need to go, I think.
Well, it's more like China's birthday last year, where I actually thought about people that wouldn't be able to walk that far to where we wanted to have a thing. And I was like, we can do a little carpool with my trike. But then I just didn't actually write that.
There are a couple of people in the community, at least, who have ADHD diagnoses. And there are definitely people in the community who get annoyed with those people when they forget something or they don't complete something or they're chronically scatterbrained. So we want to make room for those people. We want to make room for those people to be able to function and feel the value of their contributions to this community, whether or not they're causing a little extra work for other people.
What you said about ADHD makes me wonder if there are kinds of access that are less intimate in this community than some others. Things that we're maybe not thinking about in this way. We could start thinking about in this way. I don't have one in mind. I feel like a lot of the kind of physical energy accessibility things, a lot of us are more in the habit now, considering more than we were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was holding what you were talking about, that it's not equal. You started to talk about that, and I'd love how we can work with it more skillfully.
Yeah, I was talking about the sort of two levels of talking about belonging. And obviously, in a day-to-day way, and on the level of culture and politics and justice, there is not equality. There is not equal belonging. And that we have to do very concrete things together to correct that, ameliorate that. But underneath that, there is total belonging and equality from the beginning, uninterrupted, unacknowledged a lot of the time. And how can we adjust our approaches so that we assume primordial equality first rather than continually marking inequality? That was my question to myself a few years ago that I never really was able to answer. And I think this is the first start of me answering that. But what I was saying in the talk that I was giving was that we have to do both. We have to address inequality. But then I almost feel like there's something that essentializes that inequality if we're never addressing the fact that you already come with belonging. You already come with total equality. How can we start from there, right?
I just wanted to say thank you to Matri and Alexa and Nirmana and everyone else in the room who's like been the people there in Portland who have made Jaya Kula the accessible community that it at least seems to me from across the country. Knowing that you all mask and test and that when I would be physically able that I could come there and feel safe is so special to me. And just like knowing that that exists, and even anecdotally having shared it with other friends who are also ill, just like knowing that there's a place that honors that and it's important to the community is just, I don't know, it like means a lot to me and like helps me go through my day, knowing that a lot of people put in the work to make that happen and that I get to benefit from it. Just knowing that, I feel like really, really deep gratitude.
I just think it's so important right now, especially that we all try in every way we possibly can, individually and as communities and organizations, to create zones of care, zones where we're just deeply caring for each other, because we're just surrounded by lack of care. Frankly, I think this is why so many people are sick. There's lots of illnesses and lots of breakdown in people's immune systems, and there's lots of things being caused environmentally, and who knows what caused COVID, but all of it was caused by lack of care. All of it. Lack of care for each other and lack of care for our environment. The real counteracting on that is to actually insist on caring for each other. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.